Hey everyone, welcome back to Tuesday Tea with Alisha and Melissa. Today we are so excited to have Amy Beach on as our guest. We're recording here on Veterans Day. While this is going to air, you'll be hearing us in December, but I want to say first and foremost, thank you for her service. She served 30 years in the military. I'll let her give her full introduction. She was an influential leader in my husband's service. She's an incredible individual, and we're so excited to have her here today to just share a bit about her journey and drop some wisdom on us. So thank you so much for being here. I will let you introduce yourself, Amy, better than I can, and then we'll dive into it.
Okay, great. Well, I'm Amy Beach. I served for just over 30 years in the Coast Guard. Probably one thing to kind of understand how I came to be who I am is that I'm a very proud Army brat. My dad served almost 30 years in the Army, and I celebrated my first 4 birthdays in 4 different states. So I was born in Maine, California. I celebrated my second birthday. The 6 months we were stationed in Texas, I celebrated my third, and sort of so on. But when I was in middle school, my dad was assigned to West Point Military Academy, and it was supposed to just be a 3-year assignment. They asked him to stay on an extra year, which he did. And then eventually they asked him to remain there. And he spent about 2 decades teaching leadership at West Point. So a military lifestyle was what I was familiar with, and is pretty much what inspired me to pursue a military career in the end. But about 31 years ago, I had graduated from college. Here I am, a 22-year-old college graduate with a diploma in history in my hand and absolutely no clue what I wanted to do with my life. And I remember telling my dad, I just don't see myself doing a 9 to 5 office job. Like, nothing about that inspires me. And with a degree in history, you generally either go teach history or, maybe go on to law school. And I was sort of like, I needed a break from education. And so I told my dad I was thinking of applying to the Army's officer candidate school, because the Army is what I knew. He loved his career. And so I just sort of thought I'd follow in his footsteps, at least for a few years. But my dad said, Amy, why don't you take a look at the Coast Guard? In the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Air Force, we train to kill people and blow things up. But in the Coast Guard, 365 days out of the year, they are trying to protect the environment, protect people. Just every day they are doing good things out there to serve people and serve the nation. And that humanitarian side of the Coast Guard really kind of inspired me. So right then and there, I said, all right, I'm going to apply to the Coast Guard's officer candidate school. And I did. And I didn't get in. I was waitlisted. I was number 16 on the wait list. And so I spent a number of months just hoping that enough people would decide that they wanted a different future.
Get out of your way.
I would get accepted. I did. I ended up going in January of 1995. And I want to thank all those people who dropped out, and I hope they found a career that was as inspiring and as valuable as I found my time in the Coast Guard. But I really wasn't planning on making it a career. I thought it would be something more of just to get a little bit of job experience after college, pay off student loans.
Yeah.
Just to sort of do something different for a little bit. But I found I really loved the mission. And when you choose a career in the Coast Guard, it really means you're dedicating your life to protecting and serving our country, while kind of embracing a life of adventure and camaraderie that comes with it. And so while there can be a lot of tedious days, they do forge lifelong friendships when you go into any kind of military service. And I started out in what at the time was called port operations. So I was involved in emergency oil spill response. I inspected oil and chemical facilities, hazardous material containers that came on ships. I did that for a number of years. And then eventually, and this is another story that maybe we can get into later as to why I moved over into doing vessel inspections. But I went over to vessel inspections and started inspecting primarily the foreign tankers and foreign cargo ships, container ships that come into our ports, and then ended up in the Coast Guard developed into what are called sectors. And so I had wanted to go back into pollution response after doing my stint in inspections. But when they reorganized into sectors, I was no longer qualified to go back in to do pollution response because I didn't have search and rescue and the other things. So I was like, great, 12 years in, and I don't know what I'm going to do. Once again, here I am trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life.
Yeah.
I ended up being assigned to waterways management, which is just a very broad part of the Coast Guard, which does include facility container inspection and a lot of the other things, but not the pollution response that I had been hoping to get back into. But one thing I sort of found early on in my Coast Guard career is that too often the leadership in the Coast Guard is kind of lacking.
Hmm.
When I first joined, I thought I was going to go afloat, and I loved the day out on the boat. But when we went to what was our long cruise, we did, I think it was 12 or 13 days, and was on the old Mackinac icebreaker up on the Great Lakes. And it was just getting nice in Yorktown, getting to be spring, and we go up where it's snow. But they had been raving about, the captain on this ship and how great it was going to be and the experience for all of us. And I was so unimpressed. I thought he was actually a very poor leader.
Hmm.
So much so that I decided at that point, I don't want to go afloat, because if I have to 24/7 live with someone like that who is, in charge, I will probably be court-martialed. I mean, I just, it is not going to be a successful
Not gonna be
career
good.
for me. Kind of again, like at college, I was left with, well, now what do I want to do? What I came into the Coast Guard to do is not, something I feel like I'm going to be successful at. And so I talked to the company commanders. I said, what do you suggest? Like, this is what I thought I was going to do. It's just not going to fit for me. And they said, well, why don't you go work for the assignment officers? They detail everyone to the different jobs. You can talk to all of them about what their experiences are and see what interests you. And it was great advice. And a woman, commander by the name of Sue Corbin, took me under her wing, and she said, environmental protection, prevention, that's where you want to go. And I was like, okay. So she sent me out to Portland, Oregon, and I got out there, and it was another experience of, I loved the job, but the leadership there was just
Hmm.
really, really poor. And, I mean, frankly, most of my experience had ranged from, you know, micromanagers to people who were actively trying to undermine my career. And
Hmm.
sadly, these were largely other women. It wasn't men that I was having. It was, other women that were, doing this. And I still kind of scratch my head to this day, like trying to understand it. And it was enough to, frankly, make me want to get out of the Coast Guard. And I was starting to work with headhunters to pursue a different line of work. And then I got stationed in Baltimore and worked for a guy by the name of Brian Penoyer, who was a commander at the time. He ended up being an admiral, and he was the prevention department head. I reported to him. I was waterways management. As I said, at this point, I was no longer able to go back to pollution response, which is what I had wanted to do. I went into inspections because I was so tired. We'd be at 3 o'clock in the morning at some oil spill from a vessel. We'd call the inspectors and we'd say, hey, we need your help trying to figure out exactly where the oil is coming from. They'd be like, oh, yeah, we'll be out there like about 9 o'clock in the morning. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to become an inspector. So I don't have to need you people, you know.
Know it all.
And the one good piece of advice that I had gotten from my time on the Mackinac was the one thing that I did take away from that captain at the time was he said, to make himself valuable to the Coast Guard, he pursued two different avenues. So like if one wasn't open to him, like going afloat, he was also a lawyer.
Ah.
And so I took from that, like, okay, so to me, the two different career tracks are going to be inspections and pollution response. But again, the Coast Guard reorganized and ruined all my plans.
I messed y'all up.
Yes, but I get to Baltimore. I had 12 years of service, and I'd come off of a headquarters tour, and my time there just sort of reinforced my thoughts that maybe it was time to leave the Coast Guard. I was feeling a little burnt out, and really just didn't see much of a future. And Brian, I think, sensed that in me, and he very proactively mentored me.
Hmm.
And he clearly cared about me, and he clearly saw something in me and value in me, and thought that I had something to continue to offer the Coast Guard. He gave me very specific advice on how to increase my competitiveness. Like, hey, you can go to the Naval War College. They have, it's a night school program. So that you can do it, and you get the same degree as if you were assigned at the Naval War College. So all these things to help keep me competitive. And really, he gave me a renewed sense of purpose. And I don't know if you two are familiar with it, but there's a weekly leadership blog that's put out by a man named Michael Reuter. He's a professor and director of the Leadership Development Center at the Stillman School of Business, Seton Hall. And a few years back, he'd written a quote that really, I think, kind of defines how Penoyer was for me. He said, "Encouragement is that magical gift that great leaders give to those whom they serve, which opens someone's eyes to a greater belief in their own possibilities. They see themselves as better than they believe they are, capable and more confident in what they choose to do. Their attitude is uplifted and their spirit turns from self-doubt to positivity." And Admiral Penoyer gave me that gift.
Hmm.
And for the first time, again, I'm 12 years into my career. For the first time, I absolutely loved going to work. I finally had a unit and a command that made me see how great the Coast Guard could be. And as I moved up in the ranks, I wanted people to feel that same way when they came into work, to want to be there, to love what they're doing and realize that what they're doing has value and is important. And just wanted to inspire other Coasties the way Admiral Penoyer had inspired me. And during my retirement ceremony, he was there, and I told him, I told the whole crowd this, like, this is, I got to this point because of you, sir. But any questions, or do you want me to sort of go into kind of how I define leadership? Or
Yeah, that was sort of what I was going to ask. Like, I hear this one. I mean, I think there's so much data on all it takes is like one to two, whether it's children or adults or whoever, one to two folks who really like get us or inspire us or hear us to help our resilience. And so it sounds
Mhm.
like that he was that for you. And I am curious how, I'm sure though there still were not the easiest of days ahead as you continue to move up and like jobs and forms of everything, there's got its issues and its systemic problems. So kind of like, what do you think continued to keep you going, and how did you become the leader that I know from just like my husband's experience being under your leadership, you were so influential and such a positive leader in that way? Like, how do you feel like you really kind of stepped into that and were able to maintain that for all those, the next half of your career almost?
Yeah, it's funny. Every change of command ceremony that I participated in, I used to say that the title of commander was a bit misleading. That sort of implies the job is to issue orders, and that those under my commands were simply going to carry them out. But that mindset really, it only diminishes the people that you're responsible for, and it assumes that you know their jobs better than they do. And certainly, as your responsibilities grow, that's simply not realistic for me to know everyone's job,
Right.
as well as they do. And the Coast Guard has a good definition of leadership. They say it's the ability to influence others to achieve a goal by providing purpose, direction, and motivation, while embodying the core values of honor, respect, and devotion to duty. And that's certainly as solid as any. But I think the role of a leader is to create an organizational climate where people can perform at their best, and just as importantly, want to perform at their best. And to me, anyone that helps to foster that kind of environment, regardless of rank or position, is a leader. And I would say the same thing about, Taylor. He did that to the people that were working for him. He made them see value. He trusted their judgment, and it didn't matter. I may have been the commanding officer, and he was at that time a first class petty officer just before making chief.
Yeah.
It didn't matter, that his, with his rank or his rate, he was a leader as well.
Mm.
But and Taylor might remember what my leadership philosophy was at Sector Ohio Valley, and it's kind of what guided me throughout. But it was three tenets, and one was give a damn, which was always the most popular one with people to repeat to me. Help
Yes.
coasties succeed and hear the truth and tell the truth.
Hmm.
And so with Give a Damn, it's about instilling meaning and impact and helping people understand, sorry, my voice is getting dry, but that what they do matters and that they themselves matter. And several years ago, while I was stationed in Louisville and on the inland rivers for the first time, I picked up this book. It's called Prisoners of Geography, 10 maps that explain everything about the world. And in it, the author notes that essential to America's greatness is not only that it has long coasts, but deep ports, which many countries lack. And perhaps even more important, nowhere else in the world are there so many rivers whose source is not in a highland, so they run smoothly and are navigable in the United States. And that's not true of many other countries throughout the world. In fact, we have the most navigable rivers of any country in the world. And I thought it was important, we were on the inland rivers at that time, and people were like,
Yeah.
why is the Coast Guard on the inland rivers? And I'm like,
Always. That's
it's,
always the
yeah,
question.
it's
Why
like,
are
do
you
you
here?
realize the billions of dollars in trade and how vital
This.
to our economic security, to our national security that the inland
Mhm.
rivers serve? They're a conduit for moving people and goods.
Yeah.
And it is what enabled our nation to become and remain a superpower.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
so, I tried to instill in people there in Louisville that, the maintenance and protection of our nation's ports and the inland riverways, it's a treasured strategic national asset. And that's a vital mission. So, people should be pretty proud about that.
Yeah.
And that each coastie who comes to work every day and does what it is that they do, I mean, think about what commerce and things would be like if they weren't there. Every day that on the news, you're not hearing about some disaster happening on a river or in a port is because coasties are out there doing the job. And because of that, we don't always get recognized, because we keep things calm and we keep things moving.
Right.
Like a more proactive organization as opposed to like some of the other branches, which no disrespect, like our military are like amazing
Yeah, premier.
that way, and they're more reactive, right? Like you said, your dad was like,
Yeah,
well, they're being trained to like go in and like blow things up and kill people and protect in that way, but you're kind of protecting in a different way that maybe seems less important, but actually is like more important in the sense of like keeping the country
Just moving.
just
yeah,
like,
right, right.
you see what I did there? Did you like that? That was a good
I
coasting
like
pun.
it.
Did you like it?
Yeah. I mean, we prevent bad things from
Yeah,
happening, and that
exactly.
doesn't get as much news as
Because it's
when you're
not
responding to the bad
splashy,
things.
right? It's not like on the news like a splashy headline, but it's like you're avoiding all the splashy headlines by doing all of this like sort of preemptive and like work to prevent things, which I agree with you. I don't think it gets enough recognition. Like I didn't even know all of those things that you mentioned that the Coast Guard even does or is responsible for. So I feel like I'm learning a ton right now. I think it's really important what you said about the leadership piece of like letting other people do their job. I think there's this like maybe like misconception, or maybe it's just like bad leaders. Like you said, you've experienced quite a few, which it makes me really sad that a lot of them are women, because I feel like they should be like wanting to like gas you up and like
Yeah. And
pave
I
the
do think it's getting better. Like, I think the
path.
generation coming up, like, I was a lot of times dealing with that first generation of women who
Yeah,
had
totally.
an enormously rough time
Yes.
coming into
Totally.
the
So they felt like
military.
they have to give you a rough time somehow to like pave
Right. And I was
others.
like, no, it should be the opposite. You should not want
Right.
me to, but yeah.
Exactly. But I do think there's this like misconception in general in leadership around this idea of I'm in charge, so therefore I'm the holder of all the knowledge. I'm like the head, like it's a very authoritarian kind of way of doing things, right? But in reality, the job of a good leader isn't to create like little minions that are like following their every command. It's to create other leaders, right? And I feel like that is
Mhm.
Exactly.
true badge of leadership. Like having worked in leadership in schools, I know it's like very different, but it's like I didn't want to create like another little mini me or like a replica, like a robot that's just like carrying out my orders. I wanted to create someone who felt empowered and create their own agency to like make their own decisions and like so like that's like a lot of my conversations as a leader was like well, what do you think? Like, what do you want to do? Like, what is your
Right.
instinct telling you? And like building that up and like building their capacity to trust themselves. Because at the end of the day, if a good leader is a good leader and they've created like that climate, like you were saying, Amy, of like a good leader, if they leave, it should be able to like carry on in the way it was carrying on before.
Exactly.
Created a bunch of people who are empowered to do the work, regardless of sort of like who's at the top. And so I think
Right.
that's a really important thing that I just wanted to like highlight that you said, because that really resonated with me.
Yeah, there's a great quote from John Maxwell. You can tell I'm retired. I'm not used to talking so much, so I apologize. My throat is getting
You're good.
very dry and sore. He says, people will do things out of necessity because of a sense of duty or because of ingrained discipline, but their greatest accomplishments come when they're motivated into action by their heart. And so leaders should encourage the heart. They should inspire a deep sense of engagement. Like you said, not to be minions, not to be mini me's, to go out and find their own way and to feel that they're supported in doing that. So,
Right.
yeah, yeah. The second tenet I had was helping Coasties succeed. And a real leader is focused on helping other people become successful and ensuring, like, I viewed my job is to make sure that you have the resources, the training, and the support that you need to go out and do your job. And to try and anticipate obstacles and remove them, and remove anything that might be holding people back. And also recognizing, like, the Coast Guard will try and do everything with very little resources. And I was sort of the opposite. I was like, no, we can't do everything. Some things don't have to be to the standard of excellence. We're going to prioritize. And I needed to be a good steward of people's time and energy.
Yeah.
Focus it on what was really important and not that we were going to get everything done and do everything to the best. Like, just not realistic.
Possible. Yeah.
Everything
But
can't be like the most urgent priority, right?
right,
It's
right.
not a priority because there's can only a priority means it is above other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's really smart. Like you're thinking about where are my priorities, where are my values. Alicia and I talk a lot about this, right? Like where are my values and what is the most important? And all of my time and energy and money should be mostly devoted to that. Like if I look at my calendar, if I look at my resources, are the majority of my money, time, and energy going to support those things that I say are important to me? And if not, then that's like a moment where I have to reevaluate. And I think as a leader, you called out that it's really important too to like prioritize and then put the energy and the resources and the people in that direction because that's the most important and that's where the most time and energy should be spent.
Yeah, I remember Admiral Penoyer once telling me, like, if you want to see where the Coast Guard's priorities are, look at their budget.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where are they putting the money? And it was rarely in prevention in our world of work.
Yeah.
Because prevention is not sexy. It's
No,
important, but it's not as sexy as the other part.
exactly. And I also tried to instill in people that success isn't just a leader's responsibility, that, all Coasties
Yeah.
have to help each other and want each other to succeed. You needed to be vigilant about others' needs for assistance and support, and be quick to offer it. Taylor and I were in Louisville. It's when COVID-19 broke out. We there were people that were, kind of having mental health crises and other things during that time. We really, and, you're being told, like, work from home, do these things, which makes it harder to kind of keep tabs on how people are doing. And I said, we just really need to be vigilant and check in with people and make sure that they're doing okay. And, if we see someone faltering, reach out. And I felt like, okay, I've got it right when a lieutenant called me during the COVID crisis. And, again, it's got to be really hard for a lieutenant to call a captain. That's a big disparity, and say, I have a drinking problem, and COVID is making it worse. He was in a lot of back pain, and I'm like, okay, first of all, we got to take care of the medical stuff.
Yeah.
You're using alcohol because of the back pain and some of these other things, and got him the help, that he needed. It wasn't like, you have an alcohol problem? Well, I'm going to, write you up. You're going to get, in your evals, I'm going to give you, these low scores. I mean, he was taking a risk to call me. And I was like, okay, if a lieutenant feels comfortable enough with me, then I must be doing
You did something right.
something right. They feel that I'm there for them.
Yeah.
And that, the idea of success is kind of a team sport.
Right.
Yeah.
And and I think too, something that is so important in leadership, and especially just from my experience on the sidelines of being married to someone in the service, of just like that human touch as well. Like you saw that person as a real human. And while it's super important that you guys have a lot of rules and protocols and hierarchy, like that is what keeps the military going. Also, these are real people
Right.
in those systems, right? And instead
Right.
of being so black and white or immovable, I think you really saw the people and then applied the system to real humans, and yourself included, right? And I'm curious, this will kind of be our last question as we're wrapping up, but I'm just curious, as a female in a more male dominated system, especially it sounds like back when, like has been, I know it's shifting and changing, but do you think that helped you see more of that humanity or find those like more touch points because maybe you had some experiences that weren't as positive yourself, or you had those good leaders that did? Or do you think that really didn't matter? You're just a person that saw other people, or, I'm just kind of
Yeah,
curious.
no, I definitely think my early experiences with bad leadership taught me. I mean, you can learn from bad leaders. I mean, I learned how I didn't want to
What
be.
to do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And, when I was going to take command at Marine Safety Unit Savannah, which had been my like dream job, I wanted to go to Savannah, from the time I realized that the Coast Guard had a unit in Savannah. And it was a wonderful place. But there's a week overlap period with the outgoing commander and me, and he said, I'm just really concerned with a woman being here. And I'm like, it's 2014, but he was like, well, it's the South, and there can be some. I was like, look, I've dealt with it. I usually use humor to try and get around these things. And I had no problems in Savannah. I had a wonderful time. The maritime community there was very close, really good. To me, being a woman didn't hold me back in the Coast Guard. And I think, to a lot of ways, that's a testament to the Coast Guard, too, despite, some of the problems. Did I come across the onesie twosies in industry in other places, including Savannah, were misogynistic? Yeah, but I mostly found it very entertaining. Like, really? You believe that?
You're still doing
Or,
this?
yeah,
How
like,
embarrassing for you.
yeah, exactly. Like, gosh, wow. And I tried to handle it that way. I guess in a good way, it's really hard to offend me. And a lot of people tried and failed. I mean, I just generally find it very funny that people think that way, and it doesn't make me go back and be angry or upset. I mean, in the end, I had the power and the authority. I didn't.
Yeah.
I
You were
didn't
like,
have to put up.
I'm
Yeah,
good.
it's like, okay, you can be a jerk, but
Yeah.
in the end, you got to convince me that what you want to do is the right way to go, or otherwise I'm going to say no. I remember early on, it was a Greek master, and I was on there with Petty Officer Tom Pardis. So I'm the lead inspector, and the master wouldn't even look at me. And he'd direct all his questions to Tom, and Tom was finally like, she's the one you need to be talking to. She's the one that's going to sign that
She
certificate that
gets to
says you
ride
can
off your
operate.
boat if you
You
can't
like, you
leave
could
this
just see
thing.
like, his face, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
hi.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's
My mom is half Greek, and I think unfortunately that is probably like a little bit of an age thing too, right at the
Yeah,
time, but also a cultural thing for sure, for sure, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
But
yeah.
that's so funny. They
So
needed you. So like that realization, I would have like loved to be a fly on the wall and just see like the blood drain from his face, going, "Oh dear, I have to get her to like me after I
yeah,
just."
yeah. My favorite story, and then I know you wanted to wrap up, but this was when I was in Oregon, and I had the good fortune of working with Bruce Green later on in my Coast Guard career, but it was Christmas Eve, and the JG, she had gone out to do an inspection on a ship, and she came back. She's like, I can't get it done. Like, they won't do any of the things I need to get done. They won't, they won't talk to me. They won't deal with me, basically because she was a woman. He's like, is that right? So he walks into the bullpen and he grabs all the inspectors. He's like, we're going to go out and do an inspection. And I mean, that ship had a list this long of things that they needed to fix and correct. By the time he was done, he's like, next time, I think you'll treat a Coast Guard inspector with a little more, dignity and respect, and he's like, when you're done, when you're done with these things, call her, because she's going to be the one to clear them. And I mean, he was like my freaking hero after that. I was like, that is awesome. There's definitely a lot of
male crusher of the patriarchy. That's special. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing just a little piece of your own journey and such really important wisdom and takeaways around leadership. I think it applies to anyone, anywhere in life, not even just in a job, just like as we exist in the world. And there's so much to take from this. What do you think is this final piece of wisdom or advice or nugget of information that you really just want to leave folks with as we're kind of winding down today?
Yeah, I think a lot of my career was, I thought I wanted to do this and, I wanted to go afloat. Nope, that's not going to work. And just sort of not giving up. And that a lot of times those things that end up not working out that you think you really wanted or really point you to something much better. Because I far and above would say that my career in prevention was far, far more worthwhile. And I don't mean to put a dig against those that are going afloat, but when they retire, are they going to go take care of someone's yacht? I mean, what does it prepare you for really after the Coast Guard? And I look at the Coast Guard's drug interdiction program and I'm like, what, and I would make a lot of people on the response side really angry. I was like, have you had any impact on the price of cocaine? Is a gram of cocaine more expensive now than it was before because you're keeping it all, from coming to our shores? What's it done in terms of the number of people that are on drugs or fentanyl? You're not having an impact. We get a lot of money to do the mission. I was like, but what's your real impact on there? And I'm not saying it's not a righteous thing it is to keep drugs from coming in, but what's the real impact? Where if you look at the Coast Guard, you saw when shipping shut down, you didn't have toilet paper, to go get. I mean, every day what we're doing on the prevention side has impacted. But, so when something closes or you're like, I don't know, you're sort of stuck and not sure what it is that you want to do, a lot of times it leads you to something better.
So true. I think some of my best moments in life have also happened when I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I did not plan for this. And it was the best thing that could have happened.
You have to have the mindset of being okay with a pivot or okay with it not going, to your point, right? And I think that's taken away from what you're saying is we know that stuff happens all the time that isn't according to plan. If you're so rigid that you're not ready for the pivot, that is kind of where the magic can sometimes happen when you are.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you got to be open to it and ready.
Well, thank you so much again. Thank you for your service. Happy Veterans Day.
Thank you.
December,
but who's also in the service, we appreciate you. We love you. We are grateful for you. And Amy, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good talking with you.